Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Scream was just like a phenomenon.
Scream reinvented a genre.
That was a beautiful time in the movie business.
There was this little place for magic to kind of be created. You had Wes Craven, who's a master of telling those stories.
In my wisdom, I turned the project down. Went home and thought about it, and I thought, okay, if the job's still open, I'll do it.
Kevin was writing material that gave the audience a lot of credit.
It was clearly a genre that he loved.
So we didn't really expect it to have the success that it would. It made $30 million the first weekend.
And then the next weekend, it went up. And then the next weekend, it went up again.
Drew was like, no one's going to think that I'm gonna die.
That was just like, oh my God.
Everybody's a suspect!
A lot of secrecy around the script.
People literally thought I was the killer.
Or I remember seeing a lot of blacked out pages in my script. So I thought I might be wearing one of those.
I didn't know that I was going to be the killer until well into shooting.
No one's safe.
She really hit me. She accidentally punched me. It was very intense to see Ghostface. It become such a part of our pop culture.
This could grow and grow. It could be a phenomenon for a generation.
It's a Scream, baby!
Allison! A documentary on Scream.
Listen, everyone's doing a retrospective these days, okay? Like Halloween, Friday the 13th, even Psycho is doing one.
Is someone butthurt because we didn't go to the Screamathon at the theater tonight?
Look, it would have been really nice to see it in the theater, okay?
Yeah, and to see Josh and or Mark in the process.
What, Josh and or Mark? Okay, they had nothing to do with it.
Yeah. We can watch all 3 movies tonight, and you can geek talk to either one about them tomorrow.
Fine, if we're gonna do this right, where's the popcorn?
Popcorn? Hello?
Hello?
Howdy.
Who's this?
Who are you trying to reach?
Do you like scary movies?
Oh, I get it. It's Josh trying to check in on you. Mark, then. How's the movie marathon?
You never answered my question.
Do I like scary movies? Not unless they're classics. We're all about shock value these days.
Do you think the Scream movies are classics?
Sure. Is there a reason you're bothering us? Because we're about to start a movie marathon of our own.
Let's start the movie.
I'm getting my glasses. I'll be right back.
Are you about to watch the Scream movies?
That's the plan, but then you already know that if you're hanging out with Josh.
Who's Josh?
Real cute, Mark. Aren't you supposed to be asking me horror movie questions by now?
Yeah, I like that idea.
Well?
Who directed all 3 Scream movies?
OMG, you couldn't think of a harder one? Wes Craven.
Okay then. Who's the first person to get killed in Scream?
Another easy one. Drew Barrymore.
Wrong.
It was Steve, her boyfriend!
Rach, let's go! I'm gonna eat this all. Come on, Rachel. Rach? Rach!
Surprise!
think you've got more to learn about the Scream movies, Allison.
I already know everything.
Ah, but you don't know the full story.
You know, in the early 1990s, horror films in general, and American horror in particular, were really in the doldrums. The 1980s were the heyday of the slasher movie.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th, Halloween, you know, the last entries in those series at that time had pretty much tanked. The studios and the independent companies were all looking for horror icons, new franchises to exploit, but they were pretty much burned out. The industry was ready for a big change, and that was provided by Scream in 1996.
Hello?
Hello, Sydney.
The title of the movie when we bought the script was called Scary Movie. I remember reading it at night in my house alone and having to stop after the first 30 pages, and I found myself laughing and terrified at the same time. So I immediately called that night a couple of executives at Dimension.
Bob Weinstein's company had received it, and so we had about a night to read it because Bob Weinstein was in a bidding war with Oliver Stone.
While there was a little bout of competition between a couple companies, and mainly director-based companies that had done horror movies in the past, it wasn't like the mainstream studios were like, I gotta have that.
And then Bob bought it.
The balance of the horror and the comedy in the script was what was the script. And, you know, we were experimenting with some newcomer, directors.
Before Wes had signed on, I worked for another director who had been up for the job of directing it, but had felt it was far more comedic.
When the script first came to me, I had heard about it. Actually, I had read it. In the opening with the character who gets disemboweled at the end, I just felt like, I just don't want to do this again.
I felt as though Wes Craven, who had been one of the bright lights of horror starting in the 70s, was looking for a direction.
As an artist, he really wanted to do lots of different things. I mean, if you see Wes's career, he's written a novel, he directs, he attempted to do a Broadway play.
It was one of those periods in my career when I was thinking, I'm going to get doing something besides just genre. And in my wisdom, I turned the project down. And what happened is I was doing an autograph session at one of these conventions, and a kid must have been 11, something like that. Says, I've seen all your movies. You need to do something kick-ass. The movies you're doing are, they're not kicking ass anymore. You're getting soft. And, that stuck with me. So I went home and thought about it, and I called Bob back up. Said, okay, if the job's still open, I'll do it.
Well, I think Kevin was brilliant in writing the script. I heard he wrote it in 30 days, and it changed everything.
At the time, everyone was so focused on making timeless movies. You didn't want to reference that specific time in which you were making the movie, because there was an idea that, you wanted the movie to live in perpetuity. And Kevin's whole thing was diametrically opposed to that. He was like, I want to make it about right now, pop culture. This thing's going to live like that.
Kevin was writing material that gave the audience a lot of credit in terms of intelligence. And that's what made it so much fun.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Halloween.
Kevin homaged Halloween left, right, and center.
Even in the opening, Drew Barrymore, what's your favorite movie? When the killer asks her on the phone, Halloween. They say things like, we're going to go down to Mackenzie's house. The boy, his name is Billy Loomis.
In 1978, Halloween was the slasher icon movie. It spawned a genre, and I think Scream reinvented a genre.
There's a couple of things in this film that were just incredible, great luck. The finding of the mask was one.
In the script, it was written Ghost Mask. Kevin didn't describe what the guy would be wearing.
What is this? What is this guy? It's a guy in a mask and a what? And I just could not get my head wrapped around the killer. So we had done a bunch of sketch stuff. John Bisson, who was our designer at the time, did a whole bunch of stuff.
And I know that there was a lot of discussion about what mask to use.
They had the scary mask and this overly scary mask and these weird, they would bring these kind of samples. We would, stick our face in there and try to figure out what look at what the options were.
So we were doing a location scout. On the second floor of this nice little house, a little old lady owned it, and she had lived there with her husband for a bajillion years.
And we were walking around the house, and I went into a bedroom and I found the ghost mask. And I said, hey guys, what about this?
Whoa, look at that. And we went out and said, well, what's that? She said, oh, my husband used to collect masks. I don't know where he got it. Could we borrow it? So we took it back, and you can't put something on screen that you don't own. So we gave it to K&B and said, make something like this.
We took that design and we needed to kind of do a tweak on it, like a 20% tweak, only because we were trying to avoid any copyright infringement. Bob Kurtzman sculpted, I'm going to say did like 10 versions of that mask.
This is an original K&B mask made for Scream 1. This one actually, I don't believe was used on screen. Mine is the only one that has this sort of arrowhead nose to it. All the other K&Bs have a straight across, it's a straight across, it's like a perfect triangle. And the eyes are a little bit different on mine. So I don't think it was used on screen, but it's definitely one of the originals.
They had K&B make molds and carvings and replicas. Just no matter what you did on camera, it didn't have that same value.
And I just didn't like the way it looked. And so when it came to the second day, when the mask really had to be revealed, I took the mask that we didn't own, and I shot the entire day, just worried about, am I going to get the studio sued and I'll lose my job and never work again, sort of thing. And at the end of that day, we got a call. We said, we found, there's a little thing on the edge of the mask, if you look really close, it says Fun World. And we looked that up, and it's a mom and pop outfit up in New England.
They wanted to use the mask in a movie. And being just a simple country boy that I am, I said, okay, that's fine. Just be sure that you, in the credits, say Ghostface, courtesy of Fun World Easter Unlimited, our parent company. And send $100.
So there was scenes filmed with the original mask, and slowly we got a lot more, and we were able to work them into the movie, and that's what we see today.
That particular time, everybody was interested in just Scream, and I took off with it. I registered the name Ghostface, and to make sure that it was forever one and the same, I went back to the original copyright of this and amended it to where the description said Ghostface. So forever, the image and the name are one of the same. It's officially Ghostface.
You know, it's become our generation's Frankenstein and Dracula. Wes has created two of those. He created Freddy Krueger and now the Scream.
It's always reminded me of a ghost in pain. You know, you've never saw what a ghost looked like when it was in pain before, and that's what that mask has always reminded me of.
Boy, that thing is just so powerful. You know, it's one of the things where you say, well, why is that different from somebody really good like K&B did that was kind of like it? It's just like, that's what art is. It's like somehow somebody got just perfectly right, and something very close to it is like,
Hello?
When Bob came to me, Drew was attached to Star. She was to be Sidney Prescott. Bob called back and said, Drew has made a slight change. She doesn't want to star in the film anymore. I said,
Drew called and was like, I don't want to be Sydney. I have this great idea. I want to be Casey.
She's going to be the opening girl. And that's how it was known, just the opening girl.
The whole poster had Drew's face on it. So you're like, oh, it's a Drew Barrymore movie.
The fact that we killed America's sweetheart at the end of 15 minutes, it was like a body plunge to the audience.
I have a box. It's called a phone box. So we have two phones hooked into it. Drew's cordless phone and a separate cordless phone for Ghostface. Everything's working fine. Nobody's thinking twice about it. There was a surge in the generator, and it blows my box. We were lucky that the house had two lines. We plug the phones into the house lines, and we start using the house lines. Then, at one scene, Drew needs to make phone calls, but she doesn't need anyone else on the other line. In fact, no one's supposed to be. It's the police. So she starts dialing 911, screaming, hang up, 911, screaming, hang up. Little do we know the phone, I didn't unplug the phone. She's calling the police. We're in the middle of a take, and the phone starts ringing, and we're like, what's going on? Why is the phone ringing? We pick it up, and it's the police asking what the hell we're doing, and why do we keep calling them?
As far as casting the role of Sidney Prescott, we were basically given carte blanche. We just saw every girl in town.
We screen tested Nev, Brittany Murphy, AJ Langer, and Alicia Witt.
We had great choices. It just really came down to just the subtle nuances of who really was Sidney Prescott. Nev Campbell just embodied the innocence, the freshness. She was just perfect.
And she's beautiful without being, you know, quote-unquote Hollywood bombshell, big boobs. You know, she's not that. She's like this all-American kind of girl.
She has these little, they're cute teeth, and they're not
beaver teeth or anything, but they're like a little bigger, and I think I used to say they have like cute little buckies.
The Craft was the first feature film I'd done in America. I'd been acting in Canada for 5 years before that, and then a professional dancer before that. And then Scream was the first lead I got.
She was remarkable. I mean, she's a consummate professional because she'd been in the business forever.
She does that really good. I'm running and scared, but yeah, she's badass face.
When that girl's running in, fear and terror, you're like, oh no, don't hurt my little butt.
And I think that that's why it's worked really well for Nev, because she does have that persona that's very calm, and which is also what Sidney Prescott kind of has. She deals with the situation she has to deal with, so I think it's very befitting of her own personality.
I think there's just something in Nev that she has an old soul, and I think Sydney, had a really tough life. Her mother was murdered. She came from a broken home. She knew a lot of horrible secrets about her mother.
She's more just someone who's vulnerable and eases into finding her own strength.
Sidney Prescott is the final girl. And the final girl is a term that comes from Carol Clover's book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws.
They aren't victims. These are women who fight back. And I think a lot of times these movies get underrated by people who don't understand that they actually are largely about it, the empowerment of women to face the bullshit men in their lives who try to fuck them over.
She's a big part of why the franchise has lasted so long. 5 years later, 10 years later, they're still coming back to her and saying, will you continue to carry it?
There was always the model and the mentality that we're making this movie for a price. And generally when that happens, you have the best luck with finding a fresh ensemble.
If I'm right about this, I could save a man's life. Do you know what that could do for my book sales?
There are characters like Gail Weathers in real life. I have seen many Gail Weathers that are just so anxious, and they will do anything to get the story.
Courtney was definitely the most experienced. She'd been around for a while.
She was very well known because of Friends, obviously.
It becomes the issue of bringing somebody off television, so can they go into the movies? And it worked perfectly. She's a terrific Gail Weathers.
She got to play somebody really sharp and tough and screw somebody if she had to and stab them in the back or whatever it took to get where she wanted to get.
I think I stalked Courtney quite a bit on the first one. We stayed at this DoubleTree Inn in Santa Rosa that was overlooking the parking lot. So I'd be sitting there just going crazy and just waiting like some sicko. Then this limo would come down, and as soon as she'd get in the door, I'd go, ring, ring. She's like, hello? What are you doing? She's like, are you stalking me? I was like, exactly what I'm doing.
Did you really put her liver in the mailbox? Because I heard that they found her liver in the mailbox.
Several times in the casting it was like, well, this isn't really who I had in mind, but this guy is really interesting.
When I had my final callback for Scream, it was like I saw Breckenmeyer and Jason Lee was there, and they're like, nice hair, and my hair was pink. And so I went in for like Wes and the producers and like, pink hair? And I was like, oh no, I'm done.
I just love him. He's got such an amazing comedy wit. In the first one, it really displayed it a lot. He really got to play around with like his voices and the characters, and it captured a really cool aspect of himself too.
This guy can be anybody. There's one point in Scream 2 where he suddenly starts talking in an English accent, and he just did that in the take, and it's so cool.
He and Matthew were a good team. They're like sideshow Bobs.
Do you think Sid would go out with me?
I remember Matthew Lillard, his girlfriend was a casting assistant and worked across the hall, and he happened to be visiting his girlfriend one day, and I walked in and I said, could you come in and audition, please? Because you look perfect for this movie I'm casting.
Originally, they brought me in for Skeet's part, Billy. And I was clearly not nearly handsome enough to be Nev's romantic interest at the time, so they moved me over quickly to Stu.
Matthew was just full of piss and vinegar and laughter, but he also is an actor of real depth.
How do we know you're not the killer?
Skeet Ulrich. I'll never forget that audition because I was reading the Sidney Prescott role while he was auditioning, and I thought, oh, wow, you're hot.
Skeet is the great-looking guy, kind of leader of the pack.
But the danger of him is that he's dangerous feeling.
He walks the fine line of both the charming rogue and the absolute psychopath.
Corn syrup. Same stuff they use for pig's blood in Carrie.
He does so many subtle turns and twists and keeps you guessing right through to the end. Then once he reveals who he ultimately is, you are riveted to the insanity.
You're not scared, are you?
Well, when I first went in, they wanted me to look at the role of Billy or Stu. and I was a little old for it, but I could play younger. No, but I really liked the role of Dewey. It was written more of like a big muscle bound kind of lughead, and I saw something else in it. Plus, I got to kiss Courtney Cox, and I wanted to do that desperately.
He is, in a way, Dewey. I mean, he's not clueless like Dewey, but he has that innocence and openness, and just what you see is what you get.
On the script, he also died at the end, and it was a decision that the character was going to be so loved, we felt, that they should stuff him in the ambulance at the end, not dead.
Well, I learned that Dewey had a possibility of staying alive when we shot the final scene. So I came out on the stretcher and I was dead. And then Wes did a second take and said, you know what, just kind of give him a nod or something. Shows that you're still alive. At the premiere, he said, you know, you lived. It's like, I did. It's great.
Please don't kill me, Mr. Ghostface. I want to be in the sequel.
My character was Tatum Riley, and she was just the girl that I never was. So she was just this foreign, probably dates a football player kind of character. But she was so funny, and I thought there was just a lot of heart to her, which I wanted to bring to the role. When I heard they had cast Neve, the way Hollywood is, two brunettes are not allowed to be in the same film. That's just a fact. So Kathy Conrad, the producer, has blonde hair. Kathy, who's your colorist? I'm gonna make my hair blonde. And you could see their eyes just kind of going, oh, we can make her blonde.
Cotton Weary is currently awaiting appeal for the death sentence.
I'd done a movie for Dimension called Phantoms, and Bob Weinstein called me into his office and said, would you do me a favor and do this walk-on in this movie? All I had to do was to get out of a car and walk up a flight of stairs. It was one of the easiest jobs I'd ever done.
It was fun doing the scene where I punched Courtney. We all knew that the audience would be into it.
The only thing I vividly remember is Wes is telling me, you've got to catch her. The first take, because I got the camera and I got to catch her. Well, I go to catch her, and the thing I catch is her left tit. All I can remember is, oh my God, I'm groping her boob. Oh my God, I can't let go. I can't let go. I've got to, if I let go, she's going to fall. Here's the big TV star, and I'm nobody. I'm her sidekick, and the first thing I do is cop a feel.
When you cast for a voice, you get sent a million cassettes. Every guy can do 45 voices. So after a while, it's like, wow, wow. And then suddenly you hear Rogers, and it's like, whoa, just that voice is chilling.
Well, I've gotten letters from people who say, Dear Mr. Jackson, I really like your voice in these movies. Can you tell me where I can get one of those voice boxes you use? Of course, there being no voice box, it's me.
I made a policy of the actresses or actors never seeing him. Typically in Hollywood, the guy would be standing behind camera giving the other lines. He would be someplace quite distant on a real telephone talking to them.
When I'm working, I have a monitor there, so I can see through the camera's POV, though they can't see me, of course.
He was only ever a voice to me, and Wes wanted that to help all the actors with their fear.
It kept it real in a way.
Oh yeah, I love horror movies. With the mask and the costume, Ghostface is almost like a drawing that could come from any child's nightmare.
When they put that thing on, they get stronger. Throwing stuff and furniture, and I'm like, wait a minute, who is that? Like, is that a WWF wrestler? Who is behind the mask? Is it just somebody's big cousin?
Yeah, if they're wearing prosthetics, like I've worn prosthetics to be either an alien or a monster or whatever, it seemed kind of low-tech to me, It was a little difficult to see at times. How I remember us coming to wiping the blade off is we shot out a sequence and we were rehearsing the scene, and the scene I was ending up with a bloody knife. And I just mentioned it. I said, hey, it's a direct cut to me running through the hall with a clean knife. Wes just offered 2 seconds. He said, well, wipe the knife off on camera.
We landed in Santa Rosa. It offered a lot of everything that we were looking for, and it was a great staging space to get to Heidelberg and several of the other locations that we filmed at. There was a really beautiful old school.
We had got approval from the school, the high school, Santa Rosa High School, to shoot there.
While there was some discussion at the high school site, the school board really didn't know the level of discussion that was taking place. The board had questions about what was this film about.
When I first saw the script, there was no question it was going to be some level of
beyond the normal scope of business.
There was an influence in this community that was a bit shaded by the Polly Klaus murder.
The board was concerned about the level of graphic violence that was taking place in the film.
One parent heard about it, another parent heard about it, and people started getting very upset. And they had a town meeting, literally with 1,000 people, with everybody standing up and giving their opinion as to whether or not we should or shouldn't shoot there.
People were very concerned about violence against kids. And this movie, part and parcel, promotes and talks about violence in kids.
We teachers, we very much were intrigued by the idea of the film being here, mostly because the principal, we heard that the principal was killed in the film.
And it became a little bit of a witch hunt, it felt like.
And finally they decided, you cannot shoot here.
We were the unwanted stepchild, and we kind of relished in that. You know, we're so bad, they don't want us at the school.
It was ultimately decided by the board that the disruption was just too significant to the general running of the operation of the school, and that's where we made our decision.
Luckily, we found the school, and we had a great production designer, Bruce Miller, and we made it work.
After we shot the first weeks of shooting the Drew Barrymore sequence, he called me up on the Monday of the second week, and you know, you're never sure about your career. I hadn't had a hit in quite a while.
Wes, I just want to tell you, nobody else will tell you this, but your dailies suck.
I got the phone call saying, you know, that mask is not scary, that mask is kind of a joke, and it was a directive from Bob, that we pull out all the masks that we had been looking at, which there was we had 8 or so on the top truck. And we shoot the scenes that we were filming with a different mask each time until they were satisfied with what mask it was.
My guts were like in a knot for the whole second week.
I said, I have a plan. You let us finish this sequence, because we can shoot everything in this sequence. And we're going to cut it together for you, and we're going to send it to you. And if you think it's terrible, you can take over this movie, you can fire Wes, you can fire us all.
Wes was cutting during the day with his editor. So, you know, here this poor guy's working all night long and then going and sitting with his editor all day to basically save his job and save the movie.
Then we conformed it on film and sent the 13 minutes off to Bob Weinstein in New York to have a look at it.
Following Monday, the Monday of the third week, I get this call and said,
Wes, I like the way you're done. It's fantastic. I'm teaching the con. What the fuck do I know about dailies? Thanks, bye.
Maybe your mom was just a very unhappy woman.
well, you know, I've said to myself from time to time in my long career is, you know, a lot of the films that you made that really become Hallmark films are built around family. You know, The Hills of Eyes, Last House on the Left, Nightmare on Elm Street. And, you know, I didn't have anything to do with the writing of Scream 1. It came to me completely finished, but I think Kevin realized the same thing. Because a lot of this story is built around the kind of soap opera of Sidney Prescott's mother and what she was really up to.
That woman was a slutbag whore who flashed her shit all over town like she was Sharon Stone or something.
Poor Sidney was clueless, involved with Cotton Weary and Billy's father and all this stuff that is all kind of those very interesting, powerful family secrets that parents keep from their children. If you hide important facts from your children as a parent, it somehow corrodes the experience because there are places that you'll just instinctively not go with them and they'll never get to know really who you were in entirety. So if you're doing a story about that stuff, you're 5 steps ahead of a story that's just about a bunch of kids going out in the forest without any connection to family or anything else.
I love Henry Winkler.
He had never seen a horror film and he was fascinated by it, and he just came out and I think he did most of what he did in a day. And there's that scene where he happened to have a pair of scissors and he was telling the kid what a punk he was for, you know, and he had the scissors up to the kid's throat, which was totally unscripted. The kid's going, ah!
Those scissors were pretty sharp, pretty capable.
The look he had in his eye, I think the kid was convinced he was going to have his throat clipped off.
Don't just cut. Cut with attitude. There was a moment when I was being stabbed and Wes yelled cut, and he whispered to me, he said, "Do you think it hurts?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do you think it's excruciating when you're stabbed?" I go, I guess so. I've never been stabbed, but okay, I'm going to say yes. He said, "Do you think you could scream?" And I said, "I think I can."
I think the biggest, hardest thing we did, especially in Scream 1, was Scene 118. I think when we finished it, we had t-shirts made, I Survived Scene 118, and that was everything at Stu's house.
It really was a big, giant, real garage door, and they had to nail me in because I was small enough that I was falling through. And so I went up and down in that thing like 20 times. I had bruises from here to here, but, you know.
That was one of the funner ones, was in the garage, you know, chasing her around.
I thought I put up a pretty good fight. I'm always irritated when I die, because I'm like, I can take him. But at least I got him with the beer bottle.
She got a low blow in one time. That was pretty funny.
I'm a good shot, but throwing, not so much. And they were all real beer bottles. The first throw, I think I hit him, and then the second one, they had put a big red X right next to the camera. Hit this, and instead I threw it right into the lens.
I was on the roof. My ankle was tied to the luggage rack. That was it. The stunt woman that was the driver, we had not marked through at half speed. The first take, she went so damn fast, the camera fell over in the van, fell backwards, and I went off the roof. I remember grabbing the windshield wiper blade with my right hand. I went off the front of the fucking van, literally.
Everybody dies but us, so we're gonna carry on and plan the sequel.
That scene especially, with Stu and Billy and Sid in the kitchen, Courtney running around, David running around, David getting stabbed, Courtney getting, it was like endless.
It was physically very, very challenging. I had a lot of fight sequences. Emotionally, it was very challenging, I think, because Sydney's going through so much at that point.
One of the great things that Wes gave us is he gave us a freedom to find things in the moment.
A lot of their key scenes, the scenes in the kitchen when they have to stab each other and everything. I'd say 90% are lines written and 10% are things that they just worked up together.
You pansy-ass mama's boy!
Fuck! Fucking hit me with the phone, Dad!
These little improv moments came out of because he hit me with the phone. It slipped out of his hands because it was bloody.
They had this tremendous chemistry together that really worked.
Because Wes was given free rein, and Kevin wasn't like, this is my words, this is the way it's going to be. There was this little place for magic to kind of be creative.
The hardest thing I ever did was learning how to wear duct tape and hop around for 6 hours. What was really neat about it was watching them do the violent scenes over and over and over again.
As an actor, you get into this place and the energy it takes. And I distinctly remember sitting in a corner just being exhausted. And that gelatin is like sticky. So your blood all over your hands. And I just would sit there for like an hour and just play with this blood to stick. And you'd see the three of us. We were in separate corners, Nev, Skeet, and I, covered in blood, just doing nothing but playing.
Those guys at the end, they were just covered with blood. They were just caked with it.
The actors increasingly were in these bloody clothes that they never could change because you could never figure out the continuity. You could never take a bloody shirt, for instance, and then have another shirt exactly right. So you just use the same shirt over and over again.
Poor Matthew, who had more blood than Skeet did, and just was like, okay, here we go. I'm like, sorry, pal, and it's like 3 a.m. I'm putting blood all over the poor guy.
When we finally finished that, the actors told me that they took all of their wardrobe out in a field and burned it.
There was blood all over the place, and that was that.
We were all staying in the hotel, in a little motel, the whole crew and cast. And we were just having a great time. I think we kind of couldn't believe we were getting paid to have fun like that.
We weren't filming, and we were bored in the town we're in. There was really nothing to do. We decided to get in the car and go, find something to do. And then all of a sudden we saw all these prom limos with people like hanging out, woo, because it was prom time. So we started chasing prom limos to end up at like the Radisson Hotel and crash a prom party. So that's what we did.
There's one crazy story where I put on Gail's costume and I put a flasher's trench coat on. I ran into set and started flashing everybody. It was creepy.
We worked nights for like weeks on end, and you'd come back to the hotel and we'd set up a bar.
One night, there was a good amount of drinking going on. Like Skeets with his chick, and Courtney and David are looking lovingly, and Matthew, and Russ. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I turn and I'm just looking at Earl, Earl Brown. He's like, me and you, buddy, me and you. That's right, boy.
I was the annoying little brother along for the ride.
And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm like, I'm going to hook up with Earl.
Scream is actually the first horror movie I'd ever seen, and Wes asked me to come in, and he showed me that scene where Drew Barrymore gets killed, and he said, all right, well, why don't you take this home and write the music for it and bring it back Monday morning, and let's see what you got. And that basically started my career. With Sydney's theme, I thought it might be neat to use a female voice to identify with her character. And so behind that, I have sort of a bed of whistling. I think that provides sort of an eerie character to the background of that. The movies got bigger and bigger. The first Scream one is much thinner. This actually, it only had like 60 minutes of score in it. And the second one had like 85, and the third one had like over 90. We went back to the MPAA on Scream 1 9 times trying to get an R rating. We kept getting an NC-17.
You're dealing with shocking things, and it's not about, I want 2,000 gallons of blood. It's not about that. It's about getting under the skin and shocking and getting into personal things. You're just fair game. It's dealing with those fears, and those fears are bouncing around in all of our psyches and subconsciouses. And the mind kind of wants them to be dealt with, where they know they'll actually be safe, but it'll seem like they're about to be involved in something really horrible.
The key scenes were Drew Barrymore hanging in the tree. We high-sped the shot in order to pound through it even faster, because the slower version, you really hung on the horror of the moment, no pun intended. Tatum's death in the garage was more graphic. All those probably aren't hurt by the cuts we made. The ones that suffer, I think, are in the finale with Billy and Stu when they stab each other. Right now, the way it's cut, you see it hangs on Sydney too long. In the non-censored version, you see them stab each other, and it is horrific. I think it has a lot more impact.
You never get a name, you never know who is seeing your film, and quite often it's a different group each time. So it's quite horrible to deal with.
The other thing the MPA went after and ultimately didn't win on was one line of dialogue.
Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative.
It's just like, well, you're the MPA, you should not object to a thought.
I was writing all these long letters, First Amendment, this is art, this is expression, blah, 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 blah. At the very end, when we were totally desperate, Bob Weinstein, the head of the studio, makes a call, and comes back, he says, I got you an R. I said, you did? How'd you do it? He said, I convinced him it was a comedy. And that was it. I said, really? Yeah, I told him it was all satire.
It wasn't until the end of the film that they started talking about changing the title.
And what Bob so cleverly constructed in his kind of marketing notion was that you can't market a new genre to an audience.
Bob suddenly came up with Scream, which we all thought would never work.
We are looking at from the rap dinner, which was just a small amount of crew and the cast, and they gave these out to everybody. The movie was then called Scary Movie. So I have my Scary Movie bottled especially for cast and crew of Scary Movie. I have my wine bottle, still with the wine in it. I remember people drinking theirs that night thinking, you want to keep that? Especially because then they changed it to Scream.
This was another stroke of genius on the part of Bob Weinstein. Traditionally, for decades, Christmas was family films, period. Maybe an action film. And Bob came up with the idea of releasing it at Christmas, and we were all horrified and terrified.
And I know Variety did an article about a month before we came out and called us DOA. We're coming out against Beavis and Butthead in one fine day.
Like, who would release a horror slasher movie on Christmas?
When the film first came out, it did okay, but not great. And I thought, well, there you go. And then the next weekend, instead of going down, and normally a film that doesn't do well goes down 50, 60%, it went up. And then the next weekend, it went up again, was unprecedented. And that was Bob. And he just somehow saw, okay, nobody ever opens on Christmas with a horror film, but what does the horror audience do? They're probably, bored stiff. So let's give them a film.
I do remember being at the premiere. I remember the next day there was a picture of Wes and I in the LA Times, and they had interviewed some fortune teller lady that was at the party. I guess just hired to whatever, pretty cool fortune teller. And they said, how do you think this movie will do? To the fortune teller, she said, I think maybe it will make no money and go poof. And I remember, I've always thought like, ha ha, sucker, look at us now.
Is it ridiculous to say it took the country by storm.
It was the first horror film in a long time that had legs, you know, that had word of mouth that just kept building and building and building.
It could very easily have been, you know, the kind of thing that didn't do well for one weekend and just went away.
We thought if it made like 30 million, it would be amazing and it would be like last forever as like a cool movie. Did we know it was gonna be a touchstone of pop culture? No.
I actually remember the actors we were all talking, we were saying, can you imagine if it actually did well? There might be like a Halloween costume. And now every Halloween, kids come to my door in the Scream mask, which is fun.
You know, it was like a thinking man's horror movie, and you had to follow the twists and turns, and you had to be trying to stay 5 steps ahead of the plot. And the only thing was Kevin and Wes were staying 10 steps ahead of that, and that's what made it so much fun to watch.
It was the first time I remember ever screaming out loud in a theater. Matthew Perry was sitting like 3 seats away from me, and I was mortified at my exclamation at such a high volume as only a 13-year-old girl can scream.
The greatest thing about, once you start working with him is watching Wes watch his own movie, because he gets such a kick out of scaring the audience. He's just sitting there, like, you could just totally see a little devious child in him.
I think Wes reinvents himself, keeps his finger on the pulse of the youth, because he is a highly intelligent and creative man. He simply knows what he's doing, and he's good at it.
It would be hard to make Scream today because it's a taking a chance.
Our movie, which never happens today, went into theaters in December and was still in theaters in May.
Scream opened the floodgates to a full-blown slasher revival. What I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, and they just kept coming out one after the other. But it was a great boon to horror fans and the horror genre. Horror was hot again.
I mean, that was the rebirth of teenage horror, and just like in the 80s, just like Halloween was, it was the birth of a lot of subpar movies.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
Stab 2? Who'd want to do that? Sequels suck.
If the first one's successful, the traditional trajectory is you want to make the second one as quickly as possible. We were still in theaters when we were in prep for the second one.
In this one, it was following the same character, maturing before the audience's eyes, because, Ned was very young when she did the first one.
We got more money to make it. We had Kevin Williamson. We had the same actors.
I was actually signed on to the second one already, so that wasn't a choice. But for me, at that time, to have such a successful film at the beginning of my American career, I had no hesitation about doing the second.
Kevin had a hard job in Scream 2 of surprising the audience again. Now you know what the premise is. You just have to figure out who the killer is.
Sequels come with their own set of rules, which is, okay, now you're famous and now you have the success, and now people are actually imitating you. And there's a pressure on the second one to be as good as the first one. There's a pressure on Kevin to write a script as smart and genius as that, which is probably why the old adage of sequels suck is true, because you end up with this kind of thing that gets laden with everybody's ideals on it, and it doesn't get to be what it needs to be.
Kevin had this great idea for a film within a film, Stab, which was a brilliant idea based on Sidney Prescott's life. So all of Sidney's pain and everything else is dragged into being a genre film.
I think that's what this underlying message of these movies can be, especially with what goes on with Sidney's character. Just because somebody's saying it is not necessarily true. Just because this reporter just has, run with this story is possibly not the truth.
And then Kevin sent us, I think something like 30 pages by email. We read it. It was fabulous. It was on the internet in its entirety that night. And all of you little fuckers out there that think that's really cute, you fucking ruined our next 3 months.
One of the endings definitely was posted on the internet. It's not good, but there's really nothing you can do about it.
I think I just moved to LA months before I got the audition for Scream 2, and there was a lot of secrecy around the script.
I think it was my last audition I was going in for. And they're like, okay, we're going to send you the script, and you just need to bring it back in an hour. What? I'm probably not going to be finished with the script. So really, they literally messengered to my home, and an hour later, somebody was knocking on the door to get it back.
So scripts came out and it had this brown swath. It was actually some paper
from the tobacco industry to camouflage their memos. You couldn't highlight it, you couldn't mark it, so we had to like sit there, you had to especially hold it up to read it in the light. And they held out the end.
I wasn't going to sell them. The secret's safe with me, especially if it had to do with Wes Craven.
That script went through a lot of changes, and I can remember writing sessions when Kevin was already off working on his television show at the time, where we would have 6 people in a room trying to brain check each other, because you get a plot line worked out for, say, the second half of the second act, and then, oh no, we can't because she was there, and you can't, therefore you can't. So it's like, a lot of trying to figure out plot points and things in the middle of shooting, which is another thing that comes from people screwing up your script.
It took a little bit to find our rhythm.
Kevin was distracted. Right now, his co-producer, Julie Pleck, was my assistant. At a certain point, the film was underway. He had to go off and be on his television show. We were sending Julie to be with him to try to get him to write something or take dictation or whatever, and we were getting pages from her. I was writing. There were other people writing. The whole thing of Sydney doing the play acting, all that stuff was written by me.
Probably the scene that is most fun is the opening scene, and how you go in and out of the Stab movie and then the Real movie with Jada Pinkett and Omar Epps. It was a real challenge to decide when you were going to go full frame with the Heather Graham moments. It felt like it was Wes's real tour de force of his commentary on the success of the first film.
It was kind of sad to see Omar go so fast. And so brutal, like, right through the ear, They always have cool opening sequences, but that was the kind of craziest part of the beginning of that one to me.
Stop treating me like glass, Joey. I'm not gonna break.
The interesting thing about Sidney Prescott is the way in which she changes from the first film through the second too. I think in the first movie she is a typical final girl. She's thrust into this horrible situation. Her friends are being murdered. She is the one who's smart enough and resourceful enough to figure out a way to elude these killers.
One of the best things about Sydney is she does have sex in the first movie, and she still wins. So, you felt like there was an evolution there.
It's nice to see that she's not constantly just a victim, She actually has become really strong and passionate, and I think for horror films now, that's what you need to see.
By the second and third movie, she's developed a backstory that involves her mother and things that were done to her mother. It's not so much that the sins of the mother are being visited on Sydney as it is that the sins committed against her mother are being carried through into another generation.
Oh, Sydney, share with us, please.
Oh! Did you get that on film? Yes, I got that on film. Everybody's just like, oh my God. I'm like, did you get that on film? And I ad-libbed that, And I was mad at Dwayne that day because he said it right after me, trying to steal my shine. And like, why are you gonna repeat it? Then they wanted it. And so I was like, man, I came up with that. Man, I'm trying to come in on my part, man.
I'd let the geek get the girl. Well, I gave him a goatee, but I only gave him half of one because at the time grunge was big, so I thought he was influenced by that. At that time, horror movies were like people were being slaughtered and their heads cut off, and people were like, "So, what are you doing for the weekend?" And it's just not real. It's like if you see that horrific events, you're gonna be twisted up. So I thought he got a little darker, he's a little edgier. I just wanted him to evolve. I don't know how much. He still didn't really have any sex.
Miss Prescott and I have a very...
Hello?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Scream was just a phenomenon.
Scream reinvented a genre.
That was a beautiful time in the movie business.
There was this little place for magic to kind of be created. You had Wes Craven, who's a master of telling those stories.
In my wisdom, I turned the project down. Went home and thought about it, and I said, okay, if the job's still open, I'll do it.
Kevin was writing material that gave the audience a lot of credit.
It was clearly a genre that he loved.
So we didn't really expect it to have the success that it would. It made $30 million the first weekend.
And then the next weekend, it went up. And then the next weekend, it went up again.
Drew was like, no one's going to think that I'm gonna die.
That was just like, oh my God.
Everybody's a suspect!
A lot of secrecy around the script.
People literally thought I was the killer.
Or I remember seeing a lot of blacked out pages in my script. So I thought I might be wearing one of those.
I didn't know that I was going to be the killer until well into shooting.
No one's safe.
She really hit me. She accidentally punched me. It was very intense.
Could go much campier, much crazier, and come up with some kind of kooky ideas.
My mom's dead and she's never coming back.
I share the scene with Tori Spelling. It was the first, big movie that I had done, and I will never forget that scene. This is when I first fell in love with Wes Craven because he was so funny. Because we were sitting there and it got like really quiet, so I just started into my lines, and it's like, Nancy, and I said, yes, and he goes, wait till I say action. I went, oh, okay. I was brand new to the set. I didn't know.
Love Jerry O'Connell. Adorable. Great body, too.
So I had to go to KMB Special Effects House, and they had to give me a fake arm and stuff. Man, when I saw that fake arm, it was really kind of freaky because you're looking at your arm. I mean, and they even put the little hairs in and everything, and they sort of attach it to you, and then I get slashed and blood is shooting out of it, and it's a pretty frightening experience.
This self-induced isolation you got going is not healthy. I'm fine. I'm fine. I was so stupid in the audition as this girl that's, getting ready to go to college and be with the cool girls. I was just silly. And I ended up booking it, and I couldn't believe I booked it.
Elise was just a hoot to work with. She has a great sense of humor, and we had a lot of fun.
Hi, I'm Joel. The affiliate sent me. I'm your new cameraman.
Yeah, you got experience?
Huh? My agent called me and it was like, do you want to do a horror movie? I was like, for real? You know the lifespan of a black male in a horror movie. Okay, we all know. So, are you setting me up? Or does this guy what is he? No, it's a good part, Does he die? Well, we don't know.
I took your seminar in Chicago last year. I was the one in the front row asking all the questions. I remember getting a call about coming in to read for a character named Debbie Salt. And I thought, well, who wouldn't root for Debbie Salt? Come on.
A lot of casting is that got boing. I think that's her.
I didn't model Debbie after anybody, but I knew she was just wound a little tight. Or I remember seeing a lot of blacked out pages in my script. So I thought I might be wearing one of those. And the fact that Debbie was, mom, I thought was pretty brilliant.
Billy was a sick fuck who tried to get away with it. Mickey is a sick fuck who wants to get caught.
He was really intense in that. I remember watching that being like, this is a special scene.
Timothy Olyphant, he definitely did not have a lot of experience back then, but he was so handsome that kind of was what we needed.
I think for him, this was just something fun to do. It was something a little kind of cheeky to do and just not so straightforward. And I think that's why it works for him in that role.
I had to get up and sing that David Cassidy song, I Think I Love You. And I got a copy of it. I put it in my rental car in Atlanta, and I listened to it whenever I drove, so I really had the song down.
None of us really liked that song. We were like, God, why this song? Why was this song picked as the song that we have to hear all day?
We hadn't even rehearsed it, man. It was sort of like just show up and do it. And I knew going into it, if I didn't commit to that scene, it wasn't going to happen. I mean, I did the best I could.
Just like you, I'd like to get back on with my own life.
In the second one, there was this thing about Cotton that he was just hungry for celebrity and that he was hungry for media attention. Cotton wanted a piece of it after he'd been wrongly accused, and it seemed like a good engine for a character.
This is powerful, and it's touching on really important stuff in a goofy, zany way, but it's really smart, and it's really talking about something that is part of the core of our culture.
I think the Scream franchise does this great job of taking us through the pop culture and the way that it's been viewed and kind of making fun of the whole celebrity-obsessed world that we live in sometimes.
Jimmy dying and having his opinion about his death, I mean, there was a sadness. you know, and I killed him good, you know. Blood and face, I made it very clear that he was dead.
When I got killed, I was like, okay, well, that'll be a big thing. But then I was like, fuck, I mean, why do I gotta get killed?
These enormous pools of talent, sometimes you have to knock them off.
It was very bloody, and I said it's gotta be horrifically bloody, because A, I wanted to go out big, and second of all, I got technical, and I was like, you're cutting my carotid artery, and when you cut the carotid artery, it's more blood than you've ever noticed. But like, to this day, that's one of like the top 2 things people ask me in my life, you know. It's like, why did you get killed in Scream 2? You know, I don't know, I guess somebody had to go.
I loved him so much. It was, and I have to agree with many of the fans that he would never have backed up against anything without windows. Some part of me, I remember sitting in the theater thinking, no. So I really enjoyed 2, except for that.
My parents were there, and I was like, you guys are gonna come down and watch me get killed. And we did it, and everybody left. It was like the last thing, and they were like, yeah, you're gonna go here and like go to the shower. And I went to like the shower, and there was nobody there. And I'm like, yo, somebody help me with a towel? And I was like, nobody. I took a shower by myself at like sundown in this girls' college, and like the whole crew had just vamoosed, and I was like, I'm like, this is a bad fucking cliche. Like, I'm gonna get fucking killed after my death scene, and that's gonna be my life. And like, I went to the wrong showers basically, but for a moment in time, that was the one creepy moment I had filming these movies. And people always say, "You scared doing a horror movie?" I'm like, no, it's fake. But that moment, I did feel weird.
Here's your footage. Enjoy. See ya? Wouldn't want to be you.
They didn't know where to go with Joe. I said to Wes, I said, man, really, truly, I find Jamie Kennedy's character dead in my van, I'm out. He's like, what do you mean? I said, I would just leave, man. I'm not gonna stand around here. I'm not that adventurous. Like, that's not who we are. Like, you'll never see a black person get mauled by a bear. Like, we're not gonna try to feed a bear in the wilderness, you know what I mean, just to see if we can do it. Like, we're like, nah, that's cool. The bear's over there, pack up, we're gonna go to the other side of the wilderness, okay? And he said, well, what do you think you should do? I said, I think I should leave. He said, you wanna leave? I said, yeah, I'll leave. You just wanna leave the movie? I'll leave the movie. As opposed to getting killed, can I leave? He goes, how would you leave? I said, cab. He said, you want to leave by taxi? I said, yeah. He said, all right, can we get a taxi?
The car scene I loved, and it was, you know, basically just roughed out. I think the cops get killed and whatever. It wasn't crashed, there wasn't pipes, there wasn't, you know, Ghostface knocked out and having to crawl through the whole thing. It was all just kind of made up more or less on the spot, and everybody being able to do it. I mean, we pried that screen opening between the back and the front of the cop car, and both girls were able to just get through there somehow. I was looking at it, you know, I don't know how old I was at the time, but like, I could never get through that.
You know, Wes has said my dancing, because I was a professional dancer, I think, to do all the physical stuff and to do the action sequences and stuff, he feels that has helped me, because some of it's very physically challenging. For me, it's not that difficult.
Nev and I got in trouble that day. It was late at night in some small street in Pasadena, and you know, you're doing all these facial expressions in the back of a car, and it's like, look at you! No, look at you! What is that face? And we're laughing, and we couldn't stop laughing in the back, and finally Wes was like, okay, stop, and can we get this? It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, can we get, we're like, I'm sorry, and then we would lock eyes again and start, We shoot a lot of sequences with a real big knife. That's a real knife. It's not a prop knife. So when you hear it in the movies and it makes that shling, that's the real knife coming out. So even when the guy had his arms around my neck and went like this the first time, that was a real knife, and he was that close to me. Now, this is the jacket that Hallie died in on the street, okay, you know, and still got like a little bit of the fake blood and stuff on there, see? But, you know, I'm not crazy. You know, wardrobe gave this to me to just kind of remember the experience by it. I just, you know, I never wear it. It's just something that I keep up in a closet. You know, this is basically right where she got stabbed in the chest, and then that was it.
Well, I think those scenes, the ending was a lot of fun on stage there.
It was chaotic. I like the physical challenge. I really like doing that stuff.
I remember being really happy that Cotton was vaguely heroic in it.
I didn't get that last scene till we got to the set that day. I didn't know what was going to happen. It was kind of fun. It's an exciting way to go to work.
We had me as a killer, Cotton as a killer. Like, it was so many different people who could be the killer, and I liked that one about the second one.
No, I never did read the draft that had me as a killer, but I'd like to. You got it?
There's two killers in Scream 2, Billy's mother and Mickey. Mickey's character was seeking celebrity status for being a serial killer. And I think that, that's kind of unusual at that time that we were pushing those buttons in the movie.
My motive isn't as 90s as Mickey's. Mine is just good old-fashioned revenge.
I don't know about other crazed moms, but at the heart of it, it is out of some misguided want to stand up for the children. Well, I remember those last days, those reveal days, as winding up into more of the action scene. And then came the day of getting shot in the forehead. And I think Wes asked me just not to blink my eyes. And so I'm laying on the ground and this seemed like 1,000-pound camera is above me. And then there was this big pop. We didn't do it again, so I assume I didn't close my eyes. I didn't flinch.
At one scene, Nev and Laurie Metcalf fell down together and knocked their heads together really loud, and we were really afraid that one of them got a concussion.
That was painful. It hurt both of us.
Sometimes you have to beat the shit out of the material. There were a lot of things about that film that we reconstructed or reordered in editing.
We had an amazing editor, Patrick Lussier, and he and Wes worked together so well. Patrick Lussier cuts to camera, so you can film a scene one day and the next day you have the scene on set with music and sound effects.
So in Scream 2, Wes had shot specific shots to make the MPA version more violent, so that when we got the NC-17 that we anticipated back from them, we could then cut it back down and make it the version that Wes wanted.
Wes did start saying more blood in the second one. He was like, more blood. He was kind of crazy.
And immediately what we get back is an R rating for the version that was way more violent than we ever wanted. And how they responded to Scream 2 was the opening they felt was an excellent commentary on the nature of horror movies, and that we were being responsible by making that in some way.
I remember my agents calling me the first weekend and both getting on the phone and saying it made $30 million the first weekend, and I said, oh no, is that bad? They're like, no, that's really good. Oh, okay, I had no idea.
And I remember I opened up the New York Times and there was a picture of me in the New York Times. And I remember being like, this is going to be a big movie.
Mostly people say, oh, I remember you from Roseanne. But every once in a while, somebody, it will be, I know you from Scream.
My mother went to go see that movie in the theater. And I was like, Mom, what did you think of the movie? And she was like, I did not like that last scene. I get shot in the heart, and it really freaked my mom out.
Horror is this genre that people look down on all the time. And the reason it continually comes back and is successful is that people sit in the audience and they have a visceral reaction. I mean, they sit there and have a chemical reaction when they watch the screen. And that's not easy to do. To be given a two-dimensional thing and all of a sudden you feel something. And I think it takes a lot to make that happen and to bring that out in an audience.
It made Mad Magazine. To me, that's like the pinnacle. There's a cartoon of myself, my wife, and my father in Mad Magazine. Who can say it?
There he was in the hallway as Freddy.
I try not to do very much of that, but in that case I thought it was appropriate. Linda Blair's cameo came out of the fact that we knew each other, worked together, and really liked each other, so I called her up and said, why don't you come play for a day.
One day I was just hanging out, and they're like, go walk in the back of the party scene. Which is hilarious, because now I was walking down the street last week, and the guy from TMZ was like, hey, you're in Scream 2. I'm like, I'm in Scream 1. He's like, no, you're in the party scene. I'm like, you need a hobby.
I played the part of a studio executive who was worried about there being too much violence in horror films. And since I had made horror films and had violence in them, the fact that I was the guy who was warning the director not to put too much violence into it was kind of an inside joke.
I think that was Bob. Yeah, Bob loves cameos, because you can say Carrie Fisher's in the movie.
Carrie Fisher, she's like, come to my trailer. And she's like, they asked me what I wanted. She had a box of Fruit Loops and a box of Cheerios and a carton of cigarettes.
It was fun to have Jay and Silent Bob in for a little blurb at the studio tour, of which I was the studio tour guide. And Wes Craven was in my group.
I didn't approve of every cameo, but it's not up to me.
If you find yourself dealing with an unexpected backstory and a preponderance of exposition, you are dealing with the concluding chapter of a trilogy.
Scream 2, Music of the Heart, and then Scream 3. Between those 3 films and writing a novel was very, very, very busy.
There was an effort to get it together really soon, but I think a lot of people were putting their foot down and saying, I want a break.
By 3, we had less and less access to Kevin, and was more and more trying to write on the spot with a variety of people writing, and that makes it extraordinarily difficult.
Kevin had a lot of other film commitments. He was the hottest thing on the planet, and he had a TV show to maintain that was extremely important to him.
I could see that he was, sort of exhausted and beat up, and, he owed a certain amount of pages, and he owed a lot of people a lot of things.
And I think that, he had written, again, a very healthy outline, and he had the movie imagined and fashioned out. Bob got impatient with, wanting to wait, and there was conversations about, moving in another direction.
I'm a big fan. If something works, you stick with the same teams all the time, because that's where it originated, and also a fan of giving something enough time to really germinate.
I'd just been working as a screenwriter professionally for a couple years. Bob, and he called me and said, listen, I have a situation on one of our movies. I need to know if maybe you could do some quick work. And I said, well, send me the script. And he said, well, there is no script. And I said, oh, okay, well, when are you shooting the movie? And he said, in 6 weeks. What's the movie? And he said, Scream 3. Scream 3? I thought Kevin Williamson was writing that. And he said, so did we. And nobody would have rather seen Kevin writing the third movie than me.
Mainly what happened is Bob gave us Aaron Kruger for 2 weeks.
The amazing thing about Aaron is that he would go into a room and close the door, and at the end he'd come out with like 5, 6, 7, 8 pages that were shootable. He has incredible discipline.
Aaron's writing was different. It was going to be effective and everything like that, but because it wasn't Kevin, you felt that the characters were not quite the same.
It was tricky. It certainly took a lot of revisions, a lot of working with Wes, a lot of working with the actors to get close to approximating the voice he had.
And then what happens with Bob is if he meets a writer he likes, he takes him away and puts him on other projects. He gave us a big shock that he said, oh, well, sorry, Aaron's not available for you anymore.
They brought another writer while we were shooting, Lita Kalogridis, who wrote Shutter Island and produced Avatar and everything like that, who's an amazing writer.
I had met with Wes because he'd written a book called The Fountain Society, and I was adapting it for him for Image Movers. We started talking about the first 2 Scream movies because he was, in production on the third. By the end of the lunch, he said, well, we might need somebody in a couple weeks. Do you want to come on? And I said yes, very politely, and inside I was sort of, I started writing from the minute I got there.
Making Screams has not been easy. In some cases, using every trick and that you've ever learned, every wit in your body to come up with the right scene for the next day.
The writer on the third did a good job of following suit and keeping the tone of the films.
Kevin wrote a treatment, but the treatment was very different than what the movie was. It took place in Woodsboro, but it was against the backdrop of a third stab movie being shot. And it also did involve the killer's ultimate motivation being to lure Sidney back.
I had actually been hired to come back in Scream 3 as the killer.
It wasn't quite clear whether it was really Stu or Stu's twin brother or an actor playing Stu.
I actually was paid to be in Scream 3 and never had a chance to fulfill it.
Columbine happened, and just this shockwave hit, and everybody that didn't like horror films that was in a position of power came after the studios.
I do think everybody stopped a minute and said, what's our storyline here? What's our angle? What are we saying?
So there was definitely an awareness that was made pretty explicit to me that the studio was concerned about the sort of moral panic that was in the air at the time about the relationship between violent films and video games and music. It certainly had an effect on us emphasizing comedy in the third film over more graphic kills.
It almost started taking on aspects of what the first movie was kind of playing with in a joke sense. It kind of became a caricature of itself.
You can't blame a film or a horror film as the reason that a person goes out and carries out a tragedy like Columbine. I think it would have been silly to not make these films suddenly because we felt responsible. I don't think we were responsible for that. I wasn't contracted for the third, and yes, I was hesitant about it. I think just for the sake of wanting to be doing other things and wanting to play other roles and worrying also that I would be typecast. You know, you do want to be conscious of that. Scream 3 was actually a bit of a challenge in the sense that I was shooting Drowning Mona, which was a comedy I did with Danny DeVito and Bette Midler and Casey Affleck. I was doing Scream and I was doing Party of Five, so I was between nights and days and having trouble remembering who I was. I was playing so many characters.
You know, it is her story, so we definitely wanted her to be the heroine of the third movie, and we had to work within this scheduling difficulty.
Nev just wanted to work on the movie for 3 weeks.
So we had a limited amount of time that we could spend with her.
And certainly you can look at the third film and see how in the first half of the story, Gail and Dewey are really driving it, and she's off on her own parallel storyline that eventually converges. It just felt like it would be wrong to give Sydney any shorter shrift than that.
You're so right. Pop culture is the politics of the 21st century.
3 was a comment on celebrity run amok.
In the first two movies, the killers are blaming Hollywood, not taking culpability for their actions. In the third movie, in a perversely ironic way, we wanted Hollywood actually to be the cause of all of this, and as Hollywood does, to get away with it.
This is Sidney Prescott's mother.
The central kind of reason for making the third film was that you were looping all the way back around to how everything started. And to me, sort of the best way to get there, to how everything began, was to literally make it about that same story, about her mother, and about her mother's behavior, who she was, what she'd done.
And so we thought it would be fun to use that, but also play with it.
The mother of Sidney Prescott, who wanted to be the actress and was an actress in horror movies, gets raped and gets pregnant, gives up her child for adoption.
Sid's relationship with her mother is a big part of who the character is, obviously, and it gives some depth to the character that might not be there if we didn't have that backdrop for her.
One of the first things that I wrote with Wes was the nightmare with the mom coming up to the window.
I was very careful about pulling in kind of my other shtick, if you will. You know, the guy who does the nightmare films, the guy who has dream sequences in his films. I held off doing that for a long time. Did it with Sydney's mother in Scream 3, but I've been very sparing with it.
It wasn't so much about multiple endings of Scream 3 as it was about multiple beginnings. There were so many variations on the opening sequence.
I remember a sequence with an actor named Ben Damon in a car where the killer was calling the actor from inside the trunk of the car. There was an early version in Kevin's original treatment where the opening sequence was Sydney and a friend being attacked at home, and then Sydney ultimately killing the killer and unmasking the killer, and it's some fan, and this drives her into hiding.
When I was working on Scream 3, I was first booked to double David Arquette, and the only thing I saw in my room was a Ghostface outfit. They said, "You're Ghostface." I was like, this is awesome.
It was a very proud moment when I found out that I was going to be killed in the prologue of the film. I think it was my idea. It may not have been the best career move I ever did, you know, because it'd probably be fun to be out there shooting Scream 4 with all the other kids.
There were a couple different versions that we did. I believe there was one where he was climbing up through the skylight and bringing him down and killing them that way.
You a big 100% Cotton fan?
100% Cotton came out of a joke that we used to have in the cutting room on Scream 2. used to talk about how he would get his own show and he would call it 100% Cotton.
I love that he'd gone from that kind of relentless appetite for celebrity to being this kind of Jerry Springer talk show host. I thought that was really great, and that made me want to kill him too.
He was studying Hamlet at the time to do it at the Public Theater. So in between takes, there he was reading Hamlet, and there we were on the set of Scream 3. It was very intense to see Ghostface. You know, at that point, it becomes such a social phenomenon, this character, this face. Again, I hadn't really done a lot of this genre, so it was great to be working with someone like Wes Craven.
If you're watching this tape, it means, as I feared, I did not survive these killings here at Windsor College.
That kind of hurt, you know, because it was like I was a part of the movies in such a big way, and then I was like dead, and then I got brought back. But it was just kind of sad.
There's something you guys should see.
I was a quirky character actress that was in her teens, and so it was a quirky character actress in their teens who, Heather Matarazzo. There we go. Perfect.
I thought that was good, real, believable, kind of DNA, right? You know, I mean, she was very good.
Those leopard pants, and I think it was a purple shirt, and Doc Martens, and I think the Doc Martens were actually mine. As soon as everything was on, it was, yep, this is Martha. This is her. Great.
There's a totally different version of the scene where Randy appears on the videotape. One with Randy's sister, with a different actress playing Randy's sister, who was a contortionist, who was doing strange contortions the whole time while you were watching the video. Needless to say, that didn't work quite so well.
I'm not a criminal.
I think it was the end of my first season of Felicity. I got this audition, and I believe Aaron or someone had written a couple audition sides, and one was, you know, the friendly guy, the nice guy, and then the other scene was evil. It'd be the killer. You know, I don't know if everybody had to read that. I don't know if they knew who was going to be the killer.
You think it'll help me get work?
They were sort of old hat at that time, and I mean that in the most respectful way. And they were like, there, we've done this character. We good? Great? You were great. You're great, man. And, you know, like, thanks so much. One of my last days was one of the scenes where they rush in and someone's shooting me again and again and again and again. I've got like 13 squibs on me and I'm going crazy and I'm screaming. And when we were done, Dave looked down at me and goes, wow, that was intense. Good job. Can I get a coffee?
This is a hero Ghostface costume that was used in Scream 3. It was used for pretty much all the third act of the movie in the mansion. You can see it has all the squib holes. This costume's actually considered one of a kind, very unique, as it's the only costume in any of the movies that has this snap button closure system. All the other costumes in the movies were either pullover or they closed in the middle with Velcro. The reason this costume was made with the buttons was because of the squibs, and they were basically afraid that the explosion of the squibs going off would blow the Velcro open and ruin the shot. So they made this costume specifically for that shot.
There's nobody up here.
When I first worked with Wes on Scream 3, I remember the script wasn't finished, and we all went into Courtney Cox's trailer and started talking about what we were going to shoot that day. There was a certain level of chaos, but there was never upset around it, at least from what I saw. Like there was like, how are we going to do this? It was like a creative endeavor. You know, we're going to keep pounding, you know, pushing clay together and, you know, in a sense, make this movie.
The other idea that we did keep from the treatment was the idea of an actress playing Gale Weathers, and who could potentially drive a wedge between the real Gale Weathers and Dewey. That was my favorite idea in the treatment, and so certainly we expanded upon that.
I feel like I am in your mind. Well, that would explain my constant headaches.
My people said they want to meet you for Scream 3. I wasn't thrilled because, first of all, I didn't want to be scared. I remember having a lot of reservations. They're like, no, you should just go in and it will be good for your career, it'll give you exposure, and, you know, you might have fun. You know, I'm such an actor dork, but this is how I made sense of my part. She's so into her part as Gale Weathers that she knows what Gale is thinking. She's like a ninja, and she's just like almost a shadow of Gale Weathers.
So I think it really kind of shook Courtney, to have this young actress playing her kind of. It was fun to watch.
You know how girls can be nasty, catty, they're bitchy to each other. So it's a really interesting dynamic between Courtney and Parker.
I loved her. Like, she's the girl when we'd work late hours, she'd grab me by the hand and say, okay, come on. And she'd sing a song to me. And it was fantastically bizarre. I loved it. It was that Hollywood, like, oh, this really happens. Like, you're great. And I think she's great in the movie. There's a moment where she jumps into the arms of Warburton, and it's obviously over the top.
I got to hold Parker and sing to her, and became very emotional.
You're supposed to be in Woodsboro.
Well, I'm surprised you thought about me at all.
It wasn't that hard to sort of be angry, because in our personal lives, she was pretty pissed at me. And it was kind of easy for us to get upset with each other. You know, life imitated art quite a few times throughout these films. You know, this funny thing happened, because they also did Scary Movie throughout this whole time, so whenever I'm recognized on the street, I'm often recognized as Doofy.
Special Officer Doofy reporting.
Which I would like to say I'm not Doofy. I'm Dewey. And I told that to Bob when we were doing 4. I was like, Bob, you know that they call me Doofy all the time. Thank you very much.
What's your favorite scary movie?
My life.
One of the best surprises of Scream 3 was Patrick Dempsey as the police detective.
Working with Patrick Dempsey was awesome. We became great friends. It's like we were comrades in the movie, and we were, we hung out when we weren't shooting.
Patrick Kane was hired like the day before he started to shoot without having read a full script. And somehow he really found all the nuances of that character and played him in such a compelling, sympathetic yet creepy way that he never managed to make himself not a suspect. At the same time, he always seemed to be a potential romantic lead.
Sydney is the anchor of everything, so everything comes back to her character for me. That, to me, was one of the most fun things to write, especially since as the cop, he's an authority figure. You should be able to trust him, but she, push-pull. Boyfriend in the second movie, she should have trusted him.
Patrick Dempsey was a very good fight. He was tough, he was into it, which was great. It makes my job easier.
There's a version of the very end of the film, the final scene, that he's not in case A, he was dead, or B, they didn't want him to appear like he was with Sydney at the end of the film. There's a version, I believe, where he dies in the final fight scene with Roman. There are, many different variations.
I wasn't nervous or scared of Ghostface. I had already worked with Andy Dick on a number of occasions, and I knew that I could handle anything.
Seems like so many of the actors on this show were so willing to be physical and do so much stuff with it.
It was pretty interesting getting the shit kicked out of me. I got in a few good licks before I died.
Courtney put up a good fight. She stomped my foot pretty good on one of the scenes. And other places do get hit during fights.
And when it came time to die, Wes was like, this is really scary.
Wes just said, you've got her cornered, just play with it. I believe I was chasing her up some stairs, and then we find this back closet.
I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to be scared and like run up that, run up the staircase. It's like something out of a nightmare. I'm freaking out, I remember only doing it a couple of times. And I was like, that's enough. And I was talking to my therapist at the time, and she's like, sometimes it's fun to be scared.
A lot of the sets are dark. You have your nylon over your face, you have the mask over it, so your vision is impaired. You do sweat profusely in this thing, and the chin is a good sweat reservoir. So we were in the little airstream doing the fight in there, and in between takes, went to the little bed, sat down, and I'm like, we got a few minutes, laid back, all the sweat poured right back on my face and everything, and sat right back up and said, won't be doing that again.
She really hit me. She really, accidentally punched me. That was, something I'll never forget.
My lawyer, like that.
And there's a lot of discussion about how many killers there should be.
At one point, they were talking about having Emily Mortimer's character a secondary killer involved.
Wes told me that they were considering having me be the murderer, or they did a few shots where I was standing around to maybe suggest that there was something a little bit shady about my character.
I always want Dewey to be the killer. I think he's got a lot of pain and rage that he hasn't dealt with.
That's an expectation, that there are always two killers, so let's not do that. And it also felt more focused and more personal for Sydney to have this one person's jealousy and one person's vengeance.
She shut me out in the cold forever. Her own son.
I probably knew halfway into my filming of the movie. I remember Marianne. It was sort of a nonchalant reveal that I was the killer. I think we were getting coffee at craft service table, and she said, "You know, right?" I said, "Yeah, I know, sure." "What?" "I have no idea. What are you talking about?" She said, "You're the killer." And I thought, "Oh, great." I remember going home and calling whoever was my significant other at the time and saying, like, "I'm the killer!" And they were like, "Great!" I don't know if it made sense, looking back on it.
I think, Sydney's brother could show up. I mean, come on. It was a late thought. I think it was like, what part of the story has, like, sort of a nodule that we could attach something to that would be interesting?
Would Kevin have done it? I don't know. I don't know if had Kevin written that. Who knows what would have happened. I haven't talked to him about it. For the most part, it was me and the mask, and it's cool just to put it on. You can feel the eyes of everyone look at you because it's hard to not look at. I mean, it sort of draws you in.
There's a scene in the screening room with the producer where Scott Foley brings him out of a closet and he's totally bound up hand and foot.
Lance's hands were tied behind his back, and I was behind him, and I had a knife to his throat.
And Scott Foley dropped him because that was the scene.
Scott just threw him with all of his might. You could see this look of horror in Lance's face, and he just went down like a felled log.
Something happened to his hand. There was a bubble on the back of his hand that stood above this ridiculous gold Rolex wristwatch. It was the biggest thing I'd ever seen, and he was so proud of it, and he made sure his character could wear it. And he was like, "Jesus, take it easy." He might have broken his hand. I don't know. I felt really bad about it.
And we were afraid to untie him. We thought he was going to kill Scott Foley.
I got my payback for what I did to Lance during that scene. There's a moment where Sydney's behind the bar, and she's got one of those ice picks, a retracting ice pick, and she stabs me in the back with this ice pick, and I had a pad, like a square thing in my back that protect me, and she missed the plastic thing on my back. And these things retract, but it impaled me. You can see it, and that's the take they used, and literally I was like, it scared the crap out of me. But it was definitely broke skin. I was bleeding, and it was everything Nev has. And Nev is sweet and beautiful, but she's not a little girl. There's some force behind her.
You're obsessed with her, and you're obsessed with her daughter!
There was frequently conversation during the shoot, particularly by the actors, that it had a slight Scooby-Doo vibe, which it did have.
It's driven from the beginning by a pair of mystery investigators who are then joined by Park Posey's character, Jennifer Gurley, and then are joined by Sydney. It's, of the three, the hardest to obscure its Scooby-Doo-esque nature.
I personally love a good Scooby-Doo cartoon, so it's not always a bad thing.
Well, I think the 2-year gap definitely hurt the freshness of what the Scream franchise was.
I think that, Blair Witch really was the beginning of reality television. It was the reality model. The barrier between the audience and the screen was dropped. When you looked and you held up Scream 3 to that idea, it felt created. But I think, Scream 3 still delivered and was a good capper for its journey.
It was a challenge, but also a thrill to be involved with something so iconic as a horror franchise, and unusually for horror franchises, something that kept its same core cast together.
Even when we were shooting it, there was like a fantasy in the air that at some point there would be another movie.
I am tickled pink to be a part of this whole franchise. Couldn't be happier to work with Wes Craven, of all things.
Oh, it did feel good to be in the #1 flick. Yeah, that doesn't happen to me a lot.
It is quite the honor, because it's a horror movie that's going to go down in history.
This was a machine that was running on all cylinders.
The mask, the movie, the voice, the ghost face, it all worked.
Being able to work with Wes and being part of something that kind of tapped into a pop culture was really like a dream come true as a whole.
Bit overwhelming, but obviously the films have done great things for me. I'm really grateful for them. And
Hello? What's your favorite scary movie?
Scream was just like a phenomenon.
Scream reinvented a genre.
That was a beautiful time in the movie business.
There was this little place for magic to kind of be created. You had Wes Craven, who's a master of telling those stories.
In my wisdom, I turned the project down. Went home and thought about it, and I said, okay, if the job's still open, I'll do it.
Kevin was writing material that gave the audience a lot of credit.
It was clearly a genre that he loved.
so we didn't really expect it to have the success that it would. It made $30 million the first weekend.
And then the next weekend, it went up. And then the next weekend, it went up again.
Drew was like, no one's going to think that I'm going to die.
That was just, oh my God. Everybody's a suspect!
A lot of secrecy around the script.
People literally thought I was the killer.
Or I remember seeing a lot of blacked out pages in my script. So I thought I might be wearing one of those.
I didn't know that I was going to be